almost killed someone while he was walking his dog, and I realized just how much our habits can change us. So this was last semester. I was driving home from class in my brand new used convertible. So I was having a little bit of fun, and I kind of whipped into this side street by my house, and just as I turned in there, this guy was stepping out with his dog. So I slammed on the brakes. He jumped back, and we both kind of made eye contact and locked in that sort of mutually pissed off, like, he started mouthing stuff and through the windshield. And all of a sudden, next thing I know, I'd whipped open my door, started out after him, and just as he turned around, I said, "Hey, that was my bad." And we both kind of looked at each other like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "Oh, okay, it's all good." I said, "No, I came in way too fast, and I just didn't see you, and I messed up." He said, "Hey, it's all good, man. We're cool." So we part ways. I got back in my car, and I just sit down, and I'm like, what the hell just happened? Like, what was that? And then I realized that's meditation. That's mindfulness, or that's my habits working on me. So for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been doing meditation and spiritual practice, mindfulness, every single day. And over time, it just builds up. Right? That's how habits work. And particularly when we think about like making progress or kind of transformation, which is a very dramatic word, but we day to day don't really see those little incremental steps. But then all of a sudden life happens and we realize we're just a totally different person. So what I want you to take away from this story and from this talk is that your habits are really your happiness. So if you think about my story, like I just shared, kind of going back even before that, as a kid, I had pretty crazy anger issues, we'll say, especially anyone who played baseball with me would know this. But I'd throw my helmet, throw my bat, rip my gloves. In high school, I broke my hand punching a wall, which was very brilliant. Dislocated my shoulder fighting over an ex-girlfriend. So you can see where I was, right? Well, what's changed? Just my habits. 4 or 5 years of my habits wearing away at me every single day. And that's what happens. So I say, if you want to be happier, which I think is a pretty reasonable goal, whatever your baseline is, I think it's nice to maybe be a little bit happier. Don't try to be happier. Don't focus on happiness. Don't give a shit about happiness. Focus on your habits instead. And what you can think about is inputs versus outputs, or processes versus results. It's so easy to get wrapped up in the outputs or the outcomes or the result we're after, the big goal. But what ultimately leads to any outcome or any result are the processes and the inputs. Those are what actually cause the outputs. So I think about it like maybe a garden, for instance. The fruits and vegetables, that's kind of your harvest. Those are results. The process is every single day I show up and water it, fertilize it, weed it, tend the soil, and the harvest just takes care of itself. Right? So when we think about our happiness in our life, focus on inputs and processes, which are ultimately your habits. So let's talk a little bit more about the science of habits. And the place I want to begin is sharing a 2014 study that was published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. So this study found that about 40% of what we do is habit. That's pretty crazy. A little scary. So almost half of what we do every single day is sort of this automatic, habitual behavior. So these forces, man, habits, they really shape our lives way more than we kind of imagine or tend to think day to day. Now, what is a habit? How do they work? I really, really love James Clear's explanation of habits. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits, which I'll include a link below this video, and you should definitely check it out. It's actually the textbook I used for my Happiness Habits course at the University of Alabama. He talks about habits as basically these self-reinforcing feedback loops that have 4 parts. So the first part is the cue. That's something that triggers the behavior or the habit. The second part is the craving, which is this feeling of like anticipation or maybe aversion, I don't want to do that you get based on the cue. Then the response is your actual behavior, performing the habit. And then the reward is the feeling you get after. Oh, that felt good, I want more of that. And the way this becomes a loop or a cycle is you can think how you do something, right, in a given situation, and then you get a feeling after. Well, then next time you're in that situation, you subconsciously, your brain remembers that feeling. And so you do the same thing. So here's an example that makes it a little easier. You say you get a little red circle with a number in it on your app, right? And so, boom, there's a cue. Then you have a craving, sort of like a tension, or like, I want to figure out what this is about. Maybe something happened, so that you get that sort of craving. And then there's the response of checking the app. And then you get the reward of like distraction, or, oh, I got this nice message, or I got to ease that tension of not being sure if something important happened. Well, then next time you get that red dot, so remember last time I had this little bit of tension, I checked my message and it eased the tension, so now I want to do it again, and again, and again, and again, and it feeds on itself. That's why these things are really so powerful. Another example is actually brushing your teeth. So again, credit to Atomic Habits for this, but he points out that brushing your teeth, that was never really a habit in America, like as a whole, until they added something called pepsodent into the toothpaste, which is a little chemical that actually irritates your gums a little bit, and so that there's a very, very clear reward, right? So you actually anticipate, that clean feeling. Before they added that ingredient, there was really no like stimulus or reward to drive the habit loop forward. So now that we understand how these work, we can start to see, as I touched on, about 50% of what we do, they tend to be self-reinforcing. Right? These are very, very powerful things, these habits. But, importantly, we can change them. And there's something called neuroplasticity that is really what empowers us to be able to do this. And what it means is that the brain changes based on how we use it, and we can actually self-direct that change. So the first study that really looked at this was the famous Taxicab driver study. They got all these different taxicab drivers in London and scanned their brains, and what they found were that areas of their brains associated with like spatial recognition and navigation were larger, denser, had more activation than those of normal people. But what's really interesting is after these folks retired, their brains returned basically to looking more like normal people's. Another study was done, they scanned the brains of a bunch of Buddhist monks. And what they found was that areas of their brains associated with things like compassion, peacefulness, equanimity. Even I remember one of the tests was they would like set off this like mini explosive sound while the person was meditating, and they would measure how much they jumped. And a lot of these monks, they would just sit there, bang, not even flinch. And so what they found in all these studies, again, these folks who had dedicated upwards of 10,000 hours to meditation, their brains were just totally different, totally off the charts in a number of these areas. And so what we find in both those studies, again, is what you do every single day, your habits, literally change your brain. And so as you choose what you want to do every day, or maybe not even every day, but with frequency, you can transform your own brain. And that's sort of the mechanism we can use to rewire these habit patterns that we have. So you probably have a sense for that intuitively on some level, right? Whether if you've ever learned an instrument, played a sport, learned a subject, right? You tend to get better at these things as you go. But the science also confirms that that's how these work. So again, your habits are really your happiness. And what I want to leave you with is just an exercise that you can get started with to start to build some happier habits. And so this is a pretty radical out there exercise or experiment, very complex. So let's see if you can stay with me here. What I want you to do first, think of the 3 habits that you spend the most time on. And it doesn't have to be every single day. It can be going to work, or checking your phone, right? Checking email, maybe it's watching TV. 3 habits that you spend the most time on. Okay. I'll give you a second. All right. Now you've got that. Next question. Stick with me. What are the 3 habits that make you happiest? And again, it doesn't have to be every single day. Maybe it's going to church once a week, or once a week I go on a date with my friend and hang out. I play pickup basketball 2 times a week. 3 habits that bring you the most happiness. All right. So, stay with me. Can you spend less time on list number 1 and more time on list number 2? Right, I told you this was a pretty radical concept, but it's literally that simple. Right? Can we spend just a little less time on these habits that we've just picked up and accumulated over the years, and more time on habits that actually really bring us happiness? Because like I said earlier, happiness is really easy, really simple once you stop focusing on it. You have to focus on the inputs that lead to the outputs, the processes that lead to the results. Okay, because this is not rocket science. It's just the science of happiness. So thank you for coming to this 10 talk, and you can check out my channel for more on applying the science of happiness and getting better habits.